Good afternoon. Welcome to Asia Society Hong Kong Center. I am so happy to see so many of you here for today's program. And can I see a show of hand of U of M? I can't even say the word. National championship? National championship is what my response to. But, you know, I've been, those of you know that I am a Buckeye, a proud Buckeye, you can tell. And I am also on the Ohio State Alumni Association board. I'm the only alumni outside of the U.S. So I was just in Columbus 2 weeks ago for the alumni board meeting, where we wrapped up a very interesting campaign where Ohio State raised $5.3 billion for a campaign. For a public university, I mean, that is unheard of. And so I'm very, very proud Buckeye, as Holly knows. Holly is a Wolverine, and I reminded Holly, I hired you. So we are not talking about that game. But all the time I was at Ohio State, I graduated in '86, and every time we play the game up north, the team up north, we never win. I have yet to see I have yet to see a winning game, no matter how great the season Ohio State does. And I'm hoping one of these days we will while I'm alive, that we will win against the Wolverines. But I am so happy as a proud and we're part of the Big Ten right now, more than the Big Ten. I think that rivalry goes back over 100 years, and it's just, I think we're all indoctrinated into this the football games from the minute you enter the university, and I'm sure. So I want to, just out of curiosity, so I can tell my alumni board how many of you are here today. So can I see a show of hand, the alumni or affiliated with the with University of Michigan? Show of hand. Wow. Thank you. And I understand you guys are also going to be taking part in an alumni event this week. So again, that's something that I cannot convince my university to do yet. I still have a 1.5-year term in the alumni board. So I'll again use this information to share with my alumni from my alma mater about how great, how really, this team, all of you, the University of Michigan, and we're really delighted the dean is here to talk to us. And I know after we have lunch, Dean Bowman will be in conversation with Ann and Lynn, who will, I'm sure, get ready for your questions about the topic itself is interesting, very interesting, because we're all getting older, and in terms of the ideal of research together, and using that's something that Asia Society in Asia Society Policy Institute. Those of you who are familiar with my colleague Jing Chen's work, he has been working with various institutions as well as foundation since 2017, when they set up this Cure for Cancer. Jing himself is he's vice president of the International Center for China Analysis in Asia Society in New York. And Jing has been working with the Bloomberg, the New Economy Forum, and other foundations on this cure for cancer. And so I know the topic is of, I think it touches all of us. I think I cannot see, every one of us have people we know who've been, touched by, chronic diseases and so on. So I think with the dean's wonderful background, and I think there's some changes in his future, but I'm sure I'm going to leave that to Ann to tell you more about it. That serves as a teaser. But really, I think Dean Bowman joins other illustrious speakers that we've had in this room, as well as Asia Society. I know since I've been here for the last 13 years, we've had the honor of welcoming Brown's Dean of Public Health, Dean Ashish Jha, who spoke with us several times. We had just in this room about a year ago, I think some of you were with us, Yale Dean of Public Health, Dr. Megan Rainey, was here with us. And of course, Harvard Dean of T.H. Chan School of Public Health, Michelle Dean Williams, was with us several times in this last decade. And of course, our own Margaret Chen, former head of WHO, but now I don't know if she is still Dean of Tsinghua's Public Health. And so I think as you can see, public health is of great interest and importance to this Hong Kong. And one of the things those of you from Hong Kong might know, but those of you from outside of Hong Kong may not know, in terms of longevity, Hong Kong beats Japan. We have the longest, I think the longevity in Hong Kong is the best in the world. So that's something people generally don't know. So I think that is a statistic we'd like to throw out whenever we have out-of-town visitors. So I'm really delighted that today we have all of you to hear from Dean Bowman. And also, Anne, I think I wanted to read their resume, so get ready for your question, because it's very relevant, both of their background. I think the Dean joined Michigan in 2018. He is an expert in biostatistics, environmental health sciences, epidemiology, health behavior, and health equity, health management and policy, and also nutritional science. And he has done research related to Parkinson, Alzheimer, depression, and substance addiction. So I know we will learn a lot from Dean Bowman. But Anne Chi Lin is director of Lieberthal Rogan Center of Chinese Study at the University of Michigan. And I think what I found really interesting with Anne's background is you study immigration policy with current focus on academic collaborations with China and recruitment of Chinese scientists in the U.S. A lot of questions for you there. Especially when I was at Ohio State, that was the week all the international students was carrying around their own passports. They were so afraid. There were incidents, and I'm sure at Michigan too, of random revoking of visas for students, including a student that was studying art history at Ohio State, and they were the administration was really worried. So with all that climate going on in the United States, I assured Anne, there will be questions. I'm sure our audience will direct at you. And so I'm really delighted today that we have two distinguished speakers here with us. And I know we will have you back, regardless of whatever university you're from, because we would really, I think, times like this, I think we need to hear from the source, directly from the experts. And so I know we have some students out here and interns. Get ready for your questions. And there's one student, I'm trying to convince her, she's to go to the U.S. for her studies. She's decided, it's interesting, I think, Mary, you need to have a question. She decided not to apply for school in the United States, and rather she just finished her year at McGill in Canada. And her decision is actually not unusual these days. I'm hearing a lot from our interns and students here in this part of the world. So again, that's another question that I'm sure both of you can help us answer. And so with that, enjoy your lunch, and then after the lunch, Anne will come back and we'll have a presentation from Dean Bowman and get the program started. So get ready for your tough questions, and it is on the record. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to speak very briefly before the other speakers. My name is Brody Remington. I have the pleasure of being here with a whole bunch of people from the University of Michigan for our very large alumni weekend coming up. And I hope you share all of that with your friends in Ohio State. 450 people we're expecting from 15 different countries. But it's great to be here at the Asia Society. It's great to be back in Hong Kong, where I have a lot of friends and we have so many alumni. Those alumni will reconnect with each other. They'll spend time with our faculty and our deans this weekend. They'll learn about the kind of impact that the university has, saving lives, changing lives, and the enduring difference that the University of Michigan makes around the world, including here in Hong Kong. Michigan is bigger than any one person. But we're going to hear from three people today who are excellent examples of the kind of people who make Michigan extraordinary. Rich Rogel is an alumnus, an entrepreneur, an investor, a philanthropist, and for 3 decades, maybe more, has been building bridges between Ann Arbor and the world. Ann Lynn already had a fantastic introduction, but I'll just say that she's a professor in our Ford School of Public Policy and the director of the Lieberthal-Rogel Center for Chinese Studies. And her expertise is definitely relevant today. And Dean DuBois Bowman, who is the Dean of the School of Public Health, one of the most respected leaders on campus. Again, he had an excellent introduction, and I'll just say he brings people together and he accelerates the process of having discoveries turn into impact. And I think that's the role of the University of Michigan. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rich Rogel.
Thank you, Brody. First of all, it's an honor to be here. My name is Rich Rogel. I'm one of the sponsors of the Lieberthal-Rogel Center for Chinese Studies, and my wife and I named the Rogel Cancer Center at the University of Michigan, which specializes in research and fellowships, and I'm honored to be here. I think this is so important. I call Michigan Collaboration U, because what we do within the schools and within our work, especially in Asia, where I'm very involved, is we collaborate. And in these times, first of all, with the trouble between the countries, collaboration is really important. But much more importantly, and with Asia, is a collaboration for public health. We've just come through a major pandemic. It's not going to be the last one. Because, it wasn't the first one, it's not the last one. And without the collaboration, the effect on society, on people, on what we do is going to be enormous. And collaborating, working together, sharing information is really critical. I'm so honored to be here and to see Dean Bowman and Ann, who I'm very close to. Their presentation is really critical, and thank you everybody for coming.
Hello to everyone, and thank you so much for joining. Thank you for the invitation to be here. It's a pleasure and honor to be here to speak with you. This is my second time to Hong Kong. The first time was along with a similar event back in 2019. So I'd like to thank the Asia Society for hosting this today and look forward to the conversation and questions. I heard you primed for tough questions, so we'll get prepared. Alice, I'd like to thank you for hosting and just your hospitality. We haven't known each other long, but I think you can tolerate a few Ohio State, Michigan jokes in there. So I was born and raised in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and grew up in Ann Arbor. As a kid, worked the football game, selling concessions, and so I really bleed blue. So there's no there's no competition between Michigan and Ohio State off the football field. Although I think you said the number was 5.3 billion. We'll at least do 5.4. So my name is again DuBois Bowman. Have the privilege and honor of serving as dean of the school. Just completed my 7th year as dean. There was some reference earlier, so I'll share. As I was landing in Hong Kong, an announcement was released that I'll become the next president at Morehouse College. So delighted and looking forward to that. But here, completely in the spirit of maize and blue, and would like to just share some of the things that we've accomplished as a school, some of the things that are taking place at the university, and many of the exciting global partnerships. I want to start out by just thanking Rich. Rich has been just an absolute driver of partnerships between the University of Michigan and many parts of Asia and in the world, but Asia in particular. And the drive, the innovation, the energy, the support, the generosity is really unparalleled. So I'd like to give a round of applause to Rich. So public health at its core really seeks to drive health at a population level. And one of the things I like to do to illustrate this concept is if we think about health at a population level, what are the factors that contribute to or drive health? And many people will automatically think of, and many countries have approaches to health that are largely driven by clinical treatment, which is an integral part of health for any place, but roughly 30% of health is driven by social factors. 40% are driven by other economic factors. Roughly 10% is driven by the environment, and then the complement, the 20%, is driven by healthcare. And so as we think about health for a society, health for a population, we need to think in that holistic way. Again, with the clinical part being a critical component, but one that can't operate on its own. At the University of Michigan School of Public Health, we take a multidisciplinary and even interdisciplinary approach to health, and we have 6 departments. We're a top school nationally, ranked number 2 nationally, and tied for number 1 as the number 1 public school of public health. But we have 6 different departments represented. Those are biostatistics, which is quantitative analytic approach to improving health. My background is in biostatistics, and I'll share a little bit more about that. We have environmental health sciences and epidemiology. We have health behavior and health equity, health management and policy, and nutritional sciences. And so within public health sounds very focused, but within that reflects just a range of expertise. In our school, we go from wet labs all the way to people who work on policy at the highest level. And it's been an absolute joy to just try to catalyze some interdisciplinary research that cuts across those boundaries. A little bit more about me, my background in terms of research. Again, I'm a biostatistician by training. My research focuses on the analysis of large, complex data sets, and especially focused on the brain. And so I study things like Alzheimer's disease, and dementias, Parkinson's disease, and a project that's going on now that looks at the impact of prenatal exposures on subsequent brain structure and brain function. And so it follows a cohort that's now 20 years plus in the making of individuals, some of whom had prenatal exposure to a chemical, in particular, in this case, a pesticide. And so that gives you just a flavor about not only me, but the breadth of areas that you can address in public health. As I think about public health at this moment, there are many challenges before us, and some of those challenges are presented by our global interconnectedness. Some of the challenges, certainly domestically in the U.S., stem from federal actions that are eroding some of the public health infrastructure. But at the same time, while there are challenges, there are many opportunities in public health, and some owing to that same global connectedness that I mentioned. We're at a point where it's as easy as ever to share technology, to share data, to be able to share the knowledge that's derived from data, to be able to share novel solutions. And so the world that we live in now has lowered the barriers for those kinds of exchanges that can really be a terrific resource as we think about global public health. Public health as a field also, and I'll talk a little bit more about this hopefully as we get into conversation, but there are many public health challenges that know no boundaries, right? And we have to think about an approach that's inherently global, or otherwise we can't be effective. So there's a lot of opportunity. The University of Michigan has been a driver in public health at a global level. Our school works in over 70 countries around the world. And so this global aspect, including across Asia, is a really, really key component. So I'll stop there in interest of being brief and getting to the heart of the conversation, which will be an exchange with Ann Lynn, but also being able to leave time to welcome questions from you. So Ann Lynn.
Thanks so much, DuBois. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity today to return to the Asia Society to facilitate a conversation with all of you about partnerships and collaboration in the cause of advancing global public health. I'm especially delighted to be here with DuBois, who is not only known on the campus for his commitment to partnerships, but also for his support, his own and his support for public engagement. And I think several years ago, the two of us were on a stage at the Ross Business School talking about public engagement. So it's great to have a chance to be back with you. And I also want to say, because I know that Morehouse is perhaps less appreciated here in Hong Kong than it might be in the United States, that Morehouse is really the preeminent historically Black university, molder of young Black men who will become leaders, American leaders and world leaders. And at this crazy time for America, at this time where we're really questioning the value of diversity and of inclusion, I think Morehouse is so fortunate to have you go to be their president. And I hope that we can all acknowledge that by just giving you. I'm also really thrilled to be here, of course, with Rich Rogel, whose philanthropy and leadership has been instrumental in so much of Michigan and Michigan Medicine's efforts to bring together patient care and world-class education and research. So I was here once before in May 2019 in the audience when Ken Lieberthal, who is Emeritus Professor of Public Science and was Senior Advisor to President Clinton and his Senior Advisor on China, and then Michael Barr, who was then Dean of my school, the Ford School of Public Policy, and is now governor, one of the governors on the Federal Reserve Board. We're here to talk about US-China relations. And let me tell you, that was a pretty depressing talk. As depressing as it was, though, of course, none of us could really know what was going to happen in a few short months, which was, of course, that we would be in the middle of a global pandemic, and that the world would be shut down, and with that shutting down, relationships between countries so often seem to be shut down as well. Now, of course, at this point, everybody has done a postmortem on the pandemic, and I don't want to do another one, but I think I do want to just highlight one quick underappreciated lesson of the pandemic. And that is that no matter how good our technology and expertise are, no matter how capable and resolute our governments are, no matter how talented our communications people are, the essential quality that leaders need to cultivate in every sector of society is trustworthiness. Trust in leaders and in science made it possible for millions of citizens to stay home and suffer losses in their business and mask and get a vaccine that we were essentially putting in people's arms for the first time. And of course, lack of trust is at the root of the vaccine hesitancy that we've seen in countries around the world. The deep political polarization that we see now in the United States, and the suspicion of leadership that I think we are seeing in all sectors of society and in many countries around the world at the moment. Now, when political scientists like me, we talk about trust, we tend to ask questions like, why don't people believe in universities or in government or in institutions anymore? But that's really the wrong question, because the question we should be asking is, what are universities doing? What are political and economic institutions doing? What are leaders doing to make themselves worthy of being trusted? Right? And the answer to that has got to be that major institutions, that leaders, that universities understand the hopes, the troubles, the dreams, and the fears that people have. And that kind of understanding doesn't come from just looking in books or just doing work in the lab. That kind of understanding comes from being out there with people. So to be saying to people, let me understand who you are and what you believe, rather than just saying, let me tell you about how great I am, right? So we have to get to know each other first, and that's why I'm so delighted to be here with you, DuBois, today, to talk about this. And so I'm going to ask you, maybe you can start out by telling us a little bit about why global partnerships and cooperation are so important in bolstering prevention and treatment.
Yeah, thank you for your introductory remarks. You hit on really several important things that are embedded in work domestically in any geographic location, but also globally. The University of Michigan School of Public Health, as part of its storied history, your comments made me think back to the polio vaccine.
Right.
And for those who are not aware, the clinical trials for the approval of the polio vaccine were done at the University of Michigan, led by Thomas Francis, announced from the steps of Rackham Hall that the vaccine was safe and effective. That work was done across borders. That work was done at a time where society was desperately in the need for answers. And the trust issue that you hit on, there was so much more ready acceptance for the approval of a vaccine. And to Jonas Salk and Tommy Francis' credit, they didn't want to monetize, thought it should be a shared public good. And we're living in very, very different times now. The burden on the universities, on institutions of higher education, to build trust they're there, they're high, they're present. And we have to accept that challenge. We have to accept that as a responsibility to do what it takes, as you said, to understand people, their hopes, their dreams, things that are impactful in their daily lives. But there are also headwinds. The way that we exchange information these days, that there's a lot of mis and disinformation available. And so as we go about our work as institutions of higher ed, we're not necessarily just dealing with neutral parties. We may be dealing with individuals, with communities who have entrenched belief systems that don't lend themselves to productive public health habits. And so a key ingredient to overcome that, and this is present in global work, this is present again domestically, is that of community engagement. It's not enough to do science in a more rigorous fashion. That alone won't do it. It's not enough to just be able to more clearly articulate the outcomes or products of our science. That alone won't do it. We have to go about the work of building trust with communities. There will be geographic, cultural, sometimes geopolitical differences in context, but we need to make sure that we're reaching out, we're building relationships, we're understanding what some of those cultural barriers may be, engaging leaders from communities to be a part of the science, to be spokespersons for the community, so that the work ultimately can be more far-reaching and effective.
Thank you. Thanks so much. As of course we all know, the field of public health is so important in the fight against cancer. And at faculty from the School of Public Health provide critical research and leadership to the Rogel Cancer Center. Why is it so important that public health is part of the cancer fighting equation? And what are some of the projects that you can tell us about your faculty working on?
Yeah, so again, this is an area where I just have to express just gratitude, thanks, and appreciation to Rich and his family. You can't say the name cancer at the University of Michigan without saying Rogel. And it has allowed the University of Michigan to operate differently. I mentioned I'm from Ann Arbor. I did my master's degree at the University of Michigan School of Public Health, had a chance to come home to serve as dean, but I've been at some other fine universities. The collaborations across boundaries, disciplinary boundaries that you find at the University of Michigan, they just don't happen as seamlessly in other places. And a lot of that, I think, is because of the support of things like the Rogel Cancer Center. So the School of Public Health contributes in many ways to cancer research, thinking about on the front end causes of cancer, things that serve as risk factors, thinking about and contributing to drivers of innovative treatments. That is done across all of our 6 departments, and one of the areas that in particular is particularly strong is our cancer data science hub that contributes in integral ways. Again, conducting, doing analytic work for clinical trials that will lead ultimately to discovery of novel treatments. One area that I'll mention that is a unique contribution for public health is as we think about environmental exposures and even gene by environment interactions. And there's a large study at the University of Michigan that, again, is multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary. You'll hear that as a common thread throughout, that is looking at the state of Michigan and ages 18 to 49 and doing a sort of a widespread assessment and examination of environmental exposures and how they contribute to cancer. And that's something that allows both interactions and collaborations, not just across disciplines in public health, but with medicine and other areas as well. So it's something that we contribute to in a number of ways. That's but one example, but I think it is reflective of the kind of partnerships that are required to make significant progress.
Well, how about telling us about Public Health Ideas, which is this incredible program that really that you started that provides the funding for major topic areas. And let me just tee you up with one area in particular in Asia, here in Hong Kong, but of course all through Asia, the idea of healthy, livable cities is so central. And so maybe you can tell us about how creating healthy and equitable cities is a project that comes out of the ideas work, and that is so important to what many of our faculty are doing.
Absolutely. So Public Health Ideas is an interdisciplinary research initiative that I launched in the School of Public Health. And IDEAS itself is an acronym. It stands for Interdisciplinary Discovery, Engagement, and Actions for a Society. And the goal of it was to think about identifying a set of pressing public health issues for society, areas that where the University of Michigan had particular expertise as we think about the national, even global landscape, but also topics that demanded interdisciplinary work. So the structure of specialized work that exists across higher ed, certainly in the U.S., where people operate within their separate swim lanes to address really complex problems that don't define themselves by those disciplinary swim lanes, if you will. And so we ended up working together through a process that was fascinating of first identifying several topics and narrowing them down to a dozen or so, getting work groups together, doing short presentations, and ultimately landed on 4 topics. And so it's public health ideas for preventing firearm injuries, public health ideas for combating infectious diseases, public health ideas for creating health equity, and then the fourth one that you mentioned, creating healthy and equitable cities. And there have been so many successes where people who've worked on similar problems, but again, through their own disciplinary perspective, have come together for the first time to collaborate. And healthy and equitable cities is a really important one in a global context. So in 2019 is when I was in Hong Kong, and then after that, and spent some time in Chengdu before coming to Hong Kong on that same trip. And then after that, we had to discontinue travel because of COVID for several years. And then the first international trip that I did after that, we were in Nairobi, Kenya, and we went to Ethiopia. And it was sort of clear from all of those trips that many of the urban health concerns or challenges as we think about global health, they're international, and the cultural context again is distinct, but many of the challenges are shared. And so as I think about global health and creating healthy and equitable cities, there are any number of examples, but just to name a few, one example that we have to treat in a holistic manner to make any progress are health impacts of climate change. And from a global health perspective, there's opportunity to really dive in a precision fashion and think about stressors of heat indicators, the movement. Someone mentioned infectious diseases that we're likely have not experienced our last with COVID. And so the movement of people, the changes in agricultural movement of animals, interaction of people and animals will lead to conditions that are more conducive to the next infectious disease. And as people live in urban environments, that obviously leads to increased risk factors for spread. And clean air, clean water, any number of factors that we have to really be mindful of as we think about housing is another example. And so there are a number of things, and making sure that public health is at the table when we think about urban design, access to parks and clean water and air are really, really critical.
Fantastic. Well, let's switch a little bit to the subject of AI, which of
Yes.
course we are all talking about these days. How do you see AI in helping to create a healthier society? And maybe what are some of the pitfalls that we would run into?
Yeah, so we're already moving quickly in the area of AI, and I'll have to say the first reaction, I think, is often one of putting up boundaries and safeguards. As AI first hit the scene and we go about our education, providing boundaries or limitations to use was the first wave, and making sure that the students were still establishing a solid foundation in their educational journey. We quickly moved beyond that, and now thinking about how to harness AI in the classroom and making sure that our students, our graduates, are facile with use of AI, because I think individuals who are trained that way will be the most competitive in the job market. And so there are a number of different examples in our nutritional sciences, in pipeline programs where people are fusing AI into education. And then there's a lot of opportunity in research and public health practice. I mentioned climate change, the idea of kind of personal devices that might reflect heat stress is again one example. Fusing data, we're in a period of data deluge, and being able to bring together that data, harness it, use AI to leverage and access in real time, provide responses that might shape behavior, provide advanced warnings. I think there's just tremendous opportunity. As you talk about challenges, I do worry. The being in a field where, you know, for a living in my research career, I've built analytic models, and knowing the extensive care that has to go into building and validating those models, ensuring that the data and the inputs are trustworthy. And as we begin to kind of automate things within an AI realm, making sure that they're free of bias, and that can be algorithmic bias, but also on the data side and how we're training algorithms and the populations that we're using to train algorithms. And there are so many cases that will be ripe for error. And once those errors get embedded or encoded, probably very, very difficult to find. And so I think we all have to just be very vigilant as a society as we continue to make progress in this domain, that we're doing so in a way that will serve all members of society.
Okay. So last question from me, and then I want to turn to this great audience. But we all know that investments in public health and research are really critical. And of course, this is a really complicated time for investment when the federal government, which has been a major source of investment in the American scientific enterprise, is pulling back. So how are you and the university working to increase and enhance investment in health and well-being?
Yeah. So I'll start with a component of your question. I think a major strength of the U.S. has been the engine for biomedical research that has led to widespread advances that are unparalleled. We are now seeing much of that decreased. Some cases, in some areas, decimated in terms of the support, and that's of concern, because while this is an engine for progress, there's backtracking or lack of progress there. The challenges that that research was serving, all of those challenges are still there, right? And so I think this is a time where, speaking specifically in the public health realm, we may see public health issues exacerbated rather than a more accelerated line, kind of line for progress. We may see decades old kind of setbacks, and so how do we move forward? There's a kind of an education component to that. We want to make sure that we don't have gaps in education, where we are still providing people with the right kind of training so that the workforce remains strong. And some of how we establish that opportunity is through philanthropy. And so that investment in philanthropy is very necessary. On the research side, the University of Michigan School of Public Health, I'll share, we've had many grant terminations in the tens of millions of dollars. The grant terminations don't seem random. They are, really targeted areas that often affect the most marginalized communities. And so how do we make sure that work is not completely discontinued? We have to find alternative ways and alternative means of support. Some of that will be outreach to foundations, but also philanthropy plays a critical role in that respect. And so we're trying to do what we can internally to make investments, but it'll take the philanthropic community more broadly to be able to help support that work.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, DuBois, and let me turn to you now. And I'm hoping that there are lots of hard questions out there, as Alice suggested, and that we have a chance to really engage.
Let's start with some easy ones.
Please.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I'm a startup founder in Science Park. We actually are doing digitalized medical nutrition therapy. And in the nutrition science field, I don't have like a medical background. I'm more like a nerd. I do machine learning engineering. So in the nutrition science field, when we are doing projects, we have really a lot of like challenges in looking for the right research paper, research findings, because I pay a lot of respect for like the researchers in this area, and you guys did a lot of amazing research, and I have a lot of amazing insights in this aspect. But the problem is like a lot of like useful practical insights are buried from all these information, and it's not out to the public, that they don't know which kind of information they should like take in. And another problem is like a lot of influencers, even with like people that are like having a doctor degrees, like a clinical doctors, they are spreading false information online, taking in like research paper, and then regardless of like the clinical trials result, or like whether it's like a control study, they just spread out the information to get like attention from the public, so that they can purchase the program, the products. So are there any advice on like how we can tackle this problem to make it like in public, that they can actually get the useful information that all the researchers' hard work have been like put in? Thank you.
It's a really excellent question, and one of the major challenges that I think we have for public health, but more broadly the scientific community. Your question, as I think about the intrinsic challenge there, is not limited at all to public health. I think it involves several things, but I don't have a clear-cut answer. First, we make sure that we maintain the highest rigors for scientific research, and be transparent about that process, so that consumers of the information are able to not only understand what the final recommendations are as an outcome for research, but how you get there. I think we have to continue to educate people on how to be consumers of excellent science, to think critically, to challenge, to question, and that's not skepticism for skepticism's sake, but to be able to tease out what information may be reliable information from information that as you mentioned, maybe just put out there by influencers that may have no rigorous scientific basis. We also have to think about our dissemination. And the example that I'll give, we have evolved beyond this point, but not for many years, right? That is, for career development in higher ed, the ideal was to publish a paper in one of the most prestigious scientific journals, and after you do, you go on to the next research problem, right? And so that paper may be read by a handful of other experts in the world, but that hardly achieves the impact that we need to have to make sure that we're contributing and benefiting society as much as possible. So we have to think broadly about dissemination. As an academic administrator, I would say we have to also therefore build that in to how we evaluate people. And so that it's just not the number of papers that you publish and where those things are published, but how many people are you reaching? Find ways to try to develop metrics to quantify the impact of one's work, so that young scientists will find it a worthwhile investment to think about making their work more far-reaching. So, and then there are contributions outside of higher ed that I think will be important. What's the commitment of social media platforms to try to ensure that there are, there's spreading of valid information, rather than mis or disinformation. I hope we haven't seen the last of that. I do understand that gets into tricky territory, but I do think there's a responsibility across many sectors.
One of the, I think, question I have for both of you. We were going to have Professor David Zweig, author of the War on Talent, the War on Talent, speak here, and he is stuck in New York. So eventually, Holly and I are going to get him here to speak to us on that. So I'm curious about both of your views and your expertise. It's like every day here we in the newspaper see about many of the talents from mostly Chinese American or Chinese coming back to this part of the world, whether it's in China or Hong Kong, and having just been in the U.S. This last month, many of the state houses, including Ohio, and I don't know about Michigan, but I think Florida and Texas, aside from the federal government, the state government are also going after institutions about partnership with China. I heard, I don't know if this is correct, anecdotally, I heard UST, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, overnight they had a joint research with Purdue pull without any warning. And so I guess my question is twofold. The talent question, the way the current environment is going, and even before, to be fair, even during the Biden administration, there were already this suspicion of Chinese American scientists, mostly in the STEM. Now, with the State House being involved, do you think that's a trend? Do you think other states are going to fall? Instead of just worrying about the federal government, we know what the Trump administration is doing, but is that also going to be a concern? And you guys are in Michigan. So those are the two questions, the state question and also the talent question.
Thank you for warning us that was going to be your question, Alice. I've done a lot of work in the last several years, working with Chinese scientists who were targeted by the federal government, and then even more working to convince universities like the University of Michigan that we needed to take this seriously, that it wasn't just the headlines would be about one professor or another professor, but the damage was being done to faculty across the universities. All the other faculty who weren't, being investigated were fearful because of this. So I would say two things. One is, it is not necessarily a bad thing that talented, connected, smart, innovative scientists from China or from other parts of the world who have been trained in the US return to go to other countries, and maybe in particular return to countries that they're from. One of the ways that the United States has been able to accomplish, I think, what is an extraordinary post-war record of innovation and discovery in science and technology is not just because it has nurtured the scientific enterprise in the US, but because it has really built bridges to other countries to create the kind of infrastructure, that also appreciates, makes use of good science. Ideally, right, every professor who left the US to go to UST or to HKU or to Hong Kong Poly or, every professor who leaves the US to go to one of these institutions doesn't forget their connections to the United States, doesn't stop going to conferences where papers, from the United States are being presented, and in many cases continue to work with other faculty so that we have really a global enterprise of science and technology. And I think that's one of the things that really frightens me about the world, that some leaders in the US, of course, and in some state houses, but also in other countries, are really presenting this as, as a I win, you lose situation, right? Where, oh, Professor X has gone to China. Wow, the US lost one. Or, Professor Y, that person has, been able to stay in the US. Well, phew, the US won one, right? That's not the way it should be. That's why, global science is so crucial. I have, great colleagues at the University of Michigan who've chosen to return to China. I don't think of them as abandoning the ship, right? I mean, I think that, they're really extending the great work that they've done, on behalf of human health, right? Having said that, of course, we are in this moment where I think there is a lot of fear. There is this desire to score wins. And I guess what I would say is I have a lot of faith in, and I should also maybe just say personally, I mean, my parents are people who came to the US to go to graduate school, lived in the US for 20 years, had a bunch of kids, educated those kids in the United States, and then came back to Asia and have worked in Taiwan and in Hong Kong for decades after that. So maybe I have a particular bias towards really seeing that the lessons that people have learned through their training and through their collaboration over their careers don't go away just because some politicians don't understand those lessons. I think Rich and I were just talking, earlier today about the hundreds of previous UM postdocs and faculty researchers who, have returned to China but really want the University of Michigan to know that they want to continue collaborations with people in the US. How do we make that happen, right? And I think there is a long process of education, and maybe it's a process of education that we have not done well enough, where we, as scientists, make the case that science is a global enterprise, and one country winning in science is a win for the world. It's not just a win for that country. Let me say in particular about state houses, because I do think you are seeing, what I think you are seeing is that it's very easy for, for politicians at the state level both to deal with some very real fears that their constituents have. We see that in Michigan, where Goshen is trying to build a battery plant in conjunction with Ford. And I think the residents of the places where they're trying to build that plant have some, concerns that are certainly created by misinformation, but also have some very real concerns about you bring a new plant here, what kinds of jobs are they really going to create, and are we really learning the technology, or are the real technology innovations going to be implemented from Chinese scientists, and then Americans never really learn those. So I think there's some real fears, and I think that on the one hand, we need to do a lot better job of, talking about and convincing our legislators at the state and at the local level, as well as at the federal level, that there is everything to be gained by having a strong scientific enterprise. And I have, despite, I think this issue that we are seeing with this particular battery plant in Michigan, I feel that our current governor and her staff are really cognizant of the importance of supporting the scientific infrastructure that Michigan has built. And, Michigan, I come from the East Coast. We expect this kind of scientific enterprise in California and in Massachusetts. To have it in Michigan is, is a real win. And we need to preserve that. And I think we should be out there making the case. And I will say this, I think Chinese American scientists need to be out there making the case.
I'll extrapolate from your question a little bit as I think about global talent, opportunities for training, and then where one enters and contributes to the workplace, and would absolutely agree with all of your comments. But I'll extrapolate a bit on the student training side. In the School of Public Health across the University of Michigan, certainly a large presence of international students that I think make the University of Michigan better. We have among the best faculty in the world, but part of the secret sauce of training is creating a rich intellectual environment where you learn not only from your faculty, but also from your peers. And so the makeup of cohorts or classes of students really matters in training, and I think it's an opportunity for students to not only learn kind of the ins and outs and the foundation of their disciplines, but to learn how to understand people from different background, experiences, culture, learn how to work effectively across difference. And so I think we need to make sure that we try to support that as much as possible.
Collaboration. I do understand global collaboration and the importance and the effort, generational effort it takes to build an institution such as this, which is inclusive and brings about diversity. But that's not the point in today's world. And once you destroy it, to rebuild is 5 times more difficult to rebuild. And in many ways, you have a wonderful leader in Michigan, but that's not true of the entire US. Your leadership at the very top is looking to be an isolationist. The creation of xenophobia, as we watch this, is so frightening. And sending people and targeting, I think that is the concern in today's world. And what can we collectively do to counter that, to maintain what we have, the richness of this program and others on the East Coast, wherever it might be? That is the question.
I have to agree with you. One of the things that we, if I look back at the, pre-China Initiative and the China Initiative cases, the scientists whose cases were actually brought to court. And one extraordinary thing is that every one of those cases that went to court, the scientists have been found innocent, right? And what's important about that is that the people who were on juries and the judges in those cases weren't scientists, and they weren't from universities. They were ordinary Americans who could listen to the case and realize that no matter what the rhetoric around what these scientists were accused of doing, what they actually saw was not what the government said it was. And I really want to make that point because I think that absolutely we are, there is always political support to be gained by making someone else look like an enemy, right? I mean, I think that's just a true fact. But I think there is a depth of open-mindedness among Americans, and I will even say a great respect and curiosity about China, that even though the polls move in one direction or another, depending on what's happening in the world, I don't think that foundation has been destroyed. Now, give us 20 years and we could destroy that foundation. But, I go out as part of my job and talk to, audiences of ordinary people in Western Michigan, in Northern Michigan. And when I tell them about, and I sort of, try to put the U.S.-China relationship into context, people come up to me afterwards and say, I never thought about it that way. That's really interesting. Or I went on a trip to China, all these years ago, and I've always wondered about, and, thank you for telling me about this. So I think that goodwill is there, but I absolutely agree that we can squander it, and I absolutely would agree that we have politicians who are doing their best to squander it, and maybe even delighting in doing so. Yeah.
Hi, thank you both for the great insights, particularly on the trust issue. So from an educator's point of view, what do you envision that we should teach the next generation leaders how to build trust? And the second question I have is regarding vaccine hesitancy. So, so we know there is a lot of misinformation out there, but in the current situation that even the government may be also serving as a source, influencing perspectives of people. As an educator, how would you react, and what do you think our responsibilities are? Thank you.
So I mentioned earlier the importance of engaging with certain communities. There are, in the public health realm, specific models for how one goes about engaging and partnering with communities. One example that there's deep expertise in the School of Public Health is called community-based participatory research. And we have wonderful examples of CBPR in various communities. We're located close to Detroit, Michigan, and so some strong community partnerships there, but that same model has been applied in places around the world, and it's slow. It takes time to invest and build those relationships over time. So there's no substitute for that, but there are models. We do have a faculty member who specifically focuses on vaccine hesitancy and the communications part, but the communications. I use that phrase, but it's much deeper and more involved in that, and it shifts culturally depending on what some of those barriers are, but really trying to understand them. Sometimes they're religious barriers, sometimes they're cultural barriers, sometimes there are historic barriers, and being able to go in, partner with that community, understand what some of those barriers are, and then work over time to overcome them. But it is made much more difficult by the factors that we've mentioned here of just broadly speaking misinformation propagated through social media and other ways, but also sometimes even what should be more reliable means, even things like federal government.
Yeah, and let me just say, on that point specifically, I think you and I, growing up in a country where we could mostly trust our government, we tend to think that that's the way it ought to be. And of course, around the world, that is not automatically the case about governments. And so it's time, I have found it incredibly useful in the last couple of years to work with my students from countries where governments are not as trustworthy, and to learn from them about that experience and how you work past and through that experience. I have been told that people were planning on a session ending at 2, and we should let them end. But I don't know if there are any final words that you would like to say to us before we close out?
I would just like to express my thanks and appreciation for all of you attending. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for the thoughtful questions. Thanks to Alice. Thanks to Rich again. And then thanks for hosting me and other members of the University of Michigan delegation in just a wonderful city. We've early on the ground here, but have enjoyed our stay thus far and look forward to enjoying the remainder of the stay.
Thank you all.
Thank you both. Thank you, Jean, and thank you, Anne, for your wonderful talk and fireside chat. We really enjoyed it. And I want to thank you all for being here and being a great audience. Before you guys leave, I just want to, there are handouts back there. We have a really interesting conference, Global Summit, coming up June 16th and 17th, Women Health in Focus. And this is a 2 days, we're in partnership with an organization. And if you're interested in health, equity, women, this is very interesting in terms of, I think the breadth. We're going to bring in people from all over the region. And actually, there will be speakers coming from the U.S. And one of the things that, in fact, I was on a conference call yesterday, we're going to be tackling is how to identify real science versus the influencers. There's actually going to be a panel on that. So please, those of you are interested, please join us. And again, on behalf of Asia Society Hong Kong, I want to thank all of you for being here. And I'm still going to be very proud Buckeye, but it was great collaboration and really, really proud that we had the opportunity to welcome you, Dean Bowman, here. And good luck with your new adventure. I think I've been a long admirer of Morehouse and the historically black colleges. The work they do is really vital in terms of educating the next generation of leaders. So congratulations. And again, those of you who are not members, I know a few of you. Can I see those of you who are not members? Because we're going to come after you. Miri has an assignment because, without your support, we cannot continue to do what we do. We get no government funding, and you mentioned philanthropy a few times, but I think for us, in order to do programs like this, it is really the 3,000 plus members we have. They are our biggest supporters. So I ask you to consider membership. And looking forward to welcome you back to future program. As you can see from our flyers and so on, there's so many exciting programs ahead, and it just also shows that Hong Kong people want to come back. And I think I'm really delighted to see that the University of Michigan alumni family is gathering here in Hong Kong, and not anywhere else. And so I think that kind of energy. This is what Hong Kong is all about, and this is what Asia Society Hong Kong is all about. So thank you all for being here, and look forward to welcoming you back to future programs. Good afternoon.